for his continued commitment to shaping a new forward-looking partnership between the West and Africa. Mr. President, we thank you very much.
Thank you, William.
I say here without fear of any contradiction that your courage to recalibrate the relationship between the West and Africa, you have taken the lead and you have demonstrated to us that you are a true friend. I also extend our sincere appreciation to heads of state and government, heads and all other delegates whose participation, insights, and commitment have enriched these deliberations and strengthened our shared resolve. We leave this summit with a shared understanding that Africa cannot continue to occupy the margins of global financial system while carrying some of the greatest economic potential anywhere in the world. The current global financial architecture continues to impose very high borrowing costs on African economies, constraining development financing, and limiting the ability of our nations to invest at scale for required transformation. Africa, therefore, must have a stronger voice in shaping the rules that govern global finance, trade, technology, and development, because the future of the global economy will increasingly be shaped by Africa's people, Africa's markets, Africa's energy potential, Africa's minerals, Africa's innovation, and Africa's ideas. And this summit has made one thing unmistakably clear. Africa is not approaching the future with hesitation. Africa is approaching the future with ambition. We have seen very strong commitments on energy transition and green industrialization because we understand that no country can industrialize in the dark. We have advanced discussions on digital infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and innovation because Africa must enter the AI age, not only as a consumer of technology, but as a developer of technology. We have strengthened partnerships around food systems, manufacturing, healthcare, and the blue economy because Africa must create value from its own resources and expand opportunity for its own people. Above all, this summit has affirmed a new model of engagement between Africa and its partners. Not a relationship based on dependency, not a relationship defined by extraction, but a relationship grounded in mutual respect, co-investment, shared prosperity, and sovereign equality. Kenya is proud to have co-hosted this important conversation here in Nairobi, and we thank all heads of state and government, business leaders, development and partners who have contributed to its success. But the true significance of this summit is not measured by the strength of our speeches. It will be measured by the strength of our delivery. The task before us now is to turn every commitment into capital, dialogue into implementation, and ambition into tangible progress for the people of Africa. Because Africa is not waiting to be invited into the future. Africa is building that future right now with our friends. And from Nairobi, we send a very clear message to the world. Africa is ready to lead, ready to partner, and ready to shape a more balanced and a more prosperous global future. President Macron, from Nairobi, and from me, on behalf of the people of Kenya, I want to say thank you very much for all the discussions we had, the commitments we had on projects and programs ranging from nuclear energy to infrastructure development, all the way to our education facilities at the Nairobi University and all the other four universities, on behalf of the government and people of Kenya, I want to say you have truly demonstrated the value of friendship. Thank you very much. From all of us, our best wishes. Allow me now to ask my brother to make his closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear William, dear brother, Your Majesty, Head of State and Government, ambassadors and ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear William, for not just hosting this summit we co-chaired. This is a big honor for us. But for having created a special, I would say a special taste and a special atmosphere for this summit. I think everybody clearly felt during these few days what being welcomed in Kenya could mean. Nobody had the feeling to be a foreigner here or to be welcomed by you. Everybody had the feeling to be at home and to work collectively. Thanks to you, your perfect organization and the spirit you had from the very beginning. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Permettez-moi de passer en français. Désormais, en effet, je veux vraiment remercier le président Ruto pour la parfaite organisation de ce sommet. Nous avions 35 chefs d'État et de gouvernement, plusieurs ministres, des délégations d'organisations régionales, d'institutions financières, au total plus d'une cinquantaine. Et hier encore, nous étions plus de 6000 avec les chefs d'entreprise. Ici à Nairobi, l'illustration même et je dirais la capacité à agir de ce que nous avions entrepris ensemble il y a quelques mois, cher William. Et donc, merci infiniment à vous, à votre gouvernement et au Kenya. Et je veux remercier l'ensemble des chefs d'État et de gouvernement et ministres présents et dirigeants.
Directors of institutions and regional organisations who have joined us for this work. We mentioned this morning, both of us, and the President has just reminded us of this, so I don't want to dwell on this. The message is clear. It's a renewed partnership which is on an equal footing, which is clear on challenges and which is facing the future. Please allow me to discuss the results, just in line with what the President has just said. First and foremost, a dialogue between public and private. We began yesterday this work discussing the youth, which presented its projects, this private sector, which presented its commitments, and this summit will enable us to arrive at the 23 billion euros of private investment from French and African investors into the African continent, and this will lead to thousands of jobs. The AFIC, the Africa-France Impact Coalition, has 40 heads of state from France and Africa and have discussed this morning in an unprecedented fashion, and this will be long-lasting and sustainable. The report of this work will be transparent, and this coalition will become a significant tool of our economic partnership. And the dialogue this morning, it was fresh and new. President Ruto spoke to captains of industry and asked what will be required in order to do more. We saw our friend, the President of Zambia, who explained clearly the strategy he has on energy vis-à-vis directors so that they invest in his country. That is the meaning of this renewed partnerships. So we're going to implement everything that we have mentioned so that we can share risk and so that we can have considerable projects that will move forward in the field of energy, in terms of electricity grids, renewable energy, something which affects all of the countries who are present here today. Now, as it relates to the reform of the international financial architecture, we had a session which enabled us to move forward with the shared declaration on the financial architecture and a call to action that we will present at the G7 in a few months, and President Ruto will be there with me. So this must be led by captains of industry and leaders. We must work on geopolitical instability. We also need to ensure that we harness raw materials on the African continent. I think that all of the heads of state and government are aware of this. We need to lay the foundations of a shared response. So we need to ensure that there is greater responsibility of global economies to correct global imbalances. We must also affirm a strong ambition in a declaration and action plan, and to build an African structure which is more integrated, more effective and more sovereign. This requires a change in methodology. We must also trust African stakeholders, strengthen the existing instruments and better coordinate them. In this respect, we have given a mandate to the African Development Bank to be the key stakeholder of this architecture and to develop based on an existing instrument whose headquarters is here in Nairobi, ATD, to ensure that we have an instrument which provides financial guarantees to enable investors right across the globe, African and non-African, to invest further in the continent. On this point, as I said, France will provide capital to ATD, and we will engage together so that within the African Development Bank, all African states who aren't around the table today will join us, and then together we will discuss this with the great economies of the world during G7 to bring about guarantees. As it relates to peace and security, we have a joint document, a final declaration, and we affirmed something that has been forgotten for too long. African solutions must be at the heart of African crises. The tools exist. We have regional frameworks, and we must support these fully. France will step up to the plate and will be a solid partner, and we will reaffirm our determination for sustainable political solutions in the Great Lakes region and in Sudan, because there is no development without stability. Our declaration reaffirmed that cannot be sustainable peace in Africa without the absolute respect of sovereignty. We must do away with external interference, and we must do away with the privatization of security. And we also have collectively mobilized, and this is in our declaration, there is support for all members. Thank you to the Prime Minister that raised this around the table earlier on, so that we may support this initiative which seeks to do away with the abusive use of the veto at the UN Security Council. These are strong initiatives, and this message, I will take it to the headquarters of the African Union, where I will have a bilateral meeting with the President of the African Union Commission and the Secretary General of the United Nations, so that we may continue to support the Nairobi Declaration. Finally, several roundtables were organized on sectoral initiatives, which have all built balanced and useful partnerships to strengthen the sovereignty of Africa. We have the creation of a financial vehicle which seeks to mobilize private investors, and this has been approved. We announced the launch of the Farm Plus initiative with PACO, which will carry out actions which are in line with the factors mentioned by the heads of state and government this morning. We need to support stakeholders so that we can ensure that we have more resilient agriculture, so that we can continue to innovate. We have the FASA fund, which is a multi-donor fund, and France will join this fund along with other French companies. In terms of the blue economy, we will support the development of a strategic sector with investments, infrastructure, training, upskilling. Many financial stakeholders announced their commitment to this, and there will also be a partnership among a number of countries and the national maritime school. In terms of AI, we laid the foundations of a partnership between Africa and France to mobilize the potential of African countries to strengthen internet access with a number of projects, in particular projects, submarine projects that will link Africa to Europe, with innovation projects, with seed funds, with the creation of a network of Africa Forward AI clusters that will enable any African countries who wish to do so to develop AI that is sovereign, in line with what we mentioned with the President yesterday as it relates to youth. We have also collectively supported a grant program, a high-level grant program that will enable exchanges between African talent in France and French citizens in Africa. Finally, on health, the roundtables have enabled the launch of a number of initiatives, such as initiatives to support local production, Africa Initiative for Medical Access and Manufacturing, AIM 2030 of the World Bank, which will double local production on African soil by 2030. There are existing projects that we have begun to support that have been developed in South Africa, Kenya, in Rwanda, Egypt, Morocco, Senegal, Ghana, just to name a few. Technology transfer projects to ensure end-to-end production and technology transfer for vaccines, where the Institut Pasteur will work with the Institut Pasteur in Dakar. And this will lead to concrete results so that we can build resilient health systems with investment in local production and training in a number of countries, with national platforms launched by a number of you here. Now, all of this will be detailed in the deliverables that will be published this evening on the website, and which will be presented by the Africa Forward Summit Board. In all fields, since yesterday, in absolutely all of these domains, we have already achieved concrete results, concrete mobilizations that have been signed throughout this summit and that we will continue to pursue. This is an essential milestone in the construction of new relationships between France and Africa. Africa is an immense continent. President, you gave us the figures to demonstrate this earlier on. It has been 10 years, and for some it has been 20, 25 years that we've heard many people say, oh, Africa, let us not forget that this is a continent with a great future. Well, that is not correct. It is a continent which is extremely important in the present. It has the highest growth in the world, and that is to say that this continent must take its own future into its hands. Africa is here, present, and strong, and those who don't work with the African continent, those who continue to take resources to transfer them elsewhere, all of those will challenge their own future. What we have done at the Africa Forward Summit is, hand in hand with President Ruto, we have said that Africa is here. Africa organized its own summit, and France is here at its side. You gave a magnificent example of this, President, the ability to host, to welcome, to think, to stimulate, to dispute particular solutions. We've included investors, creators, heads of state and government. We have shown the example of this completely reinvented ambition. We are here at your side, and together we will continue to take action. We have started this work and we will ramp up this work, believe me. Thank you very much to the President, and thank you to all of you here for this first Africa Forward Summit. This is just the beginning.
Yes, I'm informed that
l'on vient de me dire qu'il fallait passer un contrôle à présent.
We can pass.
Yes, Your Excellencies, we have 3 questions. Let's have the 3 questions from Gloria, Sophie, and Tendaishe Chitima. I propose that we have them back to back so that you can answer them after that. Kindly, let's have the questions.
Thank you so no sound. 1, 2, and
Get her a mic that works, or she can come nearer here or somewhere.
Thank you so much, President Macron and President Ruto. My name is Sophie Mkwena from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. My question is that there's a perception out there, particularly from the Africans on the continent, that the continent was shortchanged during colonialism, and we are likely going to do the same, see the same. Can you kindly assure Africans on the continent that this time around this will not be the case? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bonsoir, messieurs les présidents. Anthony Lebos pour la chaîne française FM TV. Une question d'abord à tous les deux. Après les accords...
So some major agreements, you've got the G7 upcoming, and Mr. Ruto, you will be representing Africa there. Question, what progress, tangible progress has been made? What do you expect to get at the G7 with the others present? And the second question for President Macron, and concerning the hantavirus risk, could you please tell us, is France ready to face another epidemic if this indeed constitutes? And we know that that there are lots of questions being asked about France's health protocols. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. I'm Gloria Musimbi on your far right. So my question is, Your Excellency, President Ruto, as you prepare for the G7 summit and as a representation of Africa, what are the 3 key priorities emerging from this declaration that you intend to table before the global leaders? Thank you.
Good evening, President Ruto and President Macron. My name is Tendaishe Chitima and I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm from the creative sector. As we conclude the Africa Forward Summit, I would like to know what you think is the most important issue right now for humanity. What do you believe is our greatest responsibility? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me begin with a question from Sophie. Sophie, I think, from SABC. And yes, this continent was a victim of brutal colonialism, all the way to slave trade, exploitation, and everything in between. The African Union led in the charge for independence. We now have 54 independent states. You have asked us what assurance we can get that this will not be repeated again. I can tell you without fear of any contradiction that we do not need any assurance from anybody. We will do it ourselves. We will not allow ourselves again, as leaders from this continent, we will take charge of our own destiny. And that is why a conference like this is taking place in Nairobi, because we are recalibrating our relationship with our partners. And we have been absolutely clear that This is a relationship of equals. At the heart of this relationship is sovereign equality. At the heart of this relationship is not extraction, is not exploitation. It is investment for mutual benefit. And we are not entitled. We are not asking, to be favored. No. We are asking that we know we have responsibilities. We also know that others have responsibilities. And the reason why we had a candid conversation this afternoon, even amongst ourselves as Africans, there are things we can do for ourselves. The challenge is when you go and seek for help for things you can do for yourself. We cannot continue that way. And we are saying we are up to the task. Let me give you an example. We had a candid conversation this afternoon that while we go and look for financing our projects using other people's money, we have money in Africa. We have $4 trillion of savings in our pension funds, in our insurance companies, in our reinsurance companies, and yet we are not using that money to fund our own development. The first thing we need to do, and we have agreed with Africa Development Bank, we have agreed with Afri-Exim, we have agreed with Trade Development Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, that before we go and look for money from other people, we must structure our own DFIs to unlock these $4 trillion of our own resources to finance our development. So, we will not allow ourselves to be exploited again, because we know what we must do. And what we are saying is we don't want to also blame others for our own mistakes. President Kagame told us today that nobody owes us development. We owe it to our own selves. So we mustn't look for favors where we can do it ourselves. Secondly, Aliko Dangote told us today that our own private sector in this continent must first and foremost invest in our continent before we go looking for other investors from elsewhere. Yeah. The question people ask, if our own private sector does not have the confidence to invest in our continent, why would private sector from elsewhere have the confidence? Yeah. If we are not ready to mobilize our own resources here in Africa, resources that are available to us in pension funds, in insurance companies, why would anybody else use their savings to finance our own development? So first things first, we must take the lead as Africans, as policymakers, as private sector leaders in taking charge of our own development. Any other support we get from friends like Macron and other people will be secondary. To answer your question, we will not allow ourselves again to be slaves of anybody. We are going to take charge of our own future. Number two, somebody has asked tangible progress. What tangible progress have we achieved here? And how are we going to approach the G7? Let me say the following, that we have agreed on three fundamental things. We've agreed, number one, is we must develop an innovative mechanism of raising resources at scale, at speed, for our own development, and it starts with us. All we will be asking at the G7, in fact, We will not be asking for money from the G7. What are we asking from the G7? We are asking them to put in call-up capital. We are asking them to put in guarantee, not money. We will use our own institutions to mobilize resources to undertake our own infrastructure development. That's what we'll be going to the G7 to do. Simple. You know, in the past, we've been going to ask for aid and loans and things and more. We are saying there are things we can do by ourselves. Number two, we will be having a conversation as an outcome of this meeting on our human capital dividend. Our young people, the people of this continent, are the greatest asset that we have. They will form the workforce of the future, they will form the market of the future, and they will drive innovation, creativity, artificial intelligence, and technology. So we have one of the biggest assets. What we have agreed is how do we make that, how do we build the capacity for that asset? Through education, through training, making sure they have access to the internet, making sure that they have access to technology. The rest, the young people of this continent can do it for us and for the globe. And finally, we have agreed on energy transition. That energy transition is not just going to be about energy. It's going to be both transition in development and transition in transformation itself. So energy being, because I have said in my closing statement, there is no region, no country that can industrialize in the dark. We need energy. So these are the three most important things that I see as a take-home from this conference. And I'm very, very proud of the outcome of this conference. And I want to thank my brother, Macron, for being here with us, using his network to work with us. And we came here as heads of state because we know that first and foremost, it is our responsibility as heads of state in this government to take charge of our own development. My good brother is here as a friend, and we can only leverage on his friendship to be able to get to others so that we can fashion one trajectory for development together. Mr. President.
Merci, Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Really important to have a representative of the African continent there at the G7 when we're talking about international crises to solve, because Africa suffers from these crises as much as anyone else, and too often Africa is left out of these international discussions. Africa has been the most severely struck by the consequence of the war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine because of the cereal and fertilizer imports that have been affected. This caused enormous problems, as well as, and we saw this with the 2022 farm project, and now we're looking into other modalities. And what we see happening with the Strait of Hormuz right now, we see again the primary victims are here in Africa. We heard this from the captains of industry today. We heard it from other stakeholders. The price at the pump and the increase in the price of the barrel have major impacts. And in the terms of the food supply chain, it is, remember, a third of the ships arriving with imports to Africa come through the Strait of Hormuz. And so once again, this is a moral and political failing not to have that representation of the African continent in the G7. And so when we talk about those major global crises, we're going to have to talk about consequences on the African continent. So that's the first issue. Now, the second one about the issue of financial architecture and the need for guarantees, which is what I would call a native issue to the G7. And I discussed this with President Ruto. We want to give a clear message, and that is to calibrate the global imbalance in this regard. At the heart of the G7's economic environment, the world in which we are working is focused on very problematic macroeconomic issues, overcapacity from China, issues from the USA, European perspectives, and not enough of this gets discussed with Africa's place on the whole value chain, agriculture, industry, you name it. If developed economies do not adhere to that agenda, and that's the first thing, we've got to get them to respect the rules. Secondly, then how would we even be able to hope to make a difference? And so all of the G7 and their partners like India, Brazil, South Korea, and others who are invited to the G7, it's important for all of those countries to adhere to that agenda. No, and it's not the G7 countries that are mostly doing this. But when it comes to raw material exports, for example, when you look at primary commodities and rare earths, we've got to make sure that Africa is part of the conversation. We have a shared agenda for the G7 and for Africa, which is of great strategic importance. And now, in some ways, we've got to counter the predators of the 21st century, those who want to get their hands on Africa's resources and retain the global market control. So this is something really concrete that we're going to discuss. We have a shared strategy to make sure that Africa is further up the that value chain and can play its full part as a sovereign player. And so that's why we're going to the G7 together, and also because we want to have maximum support among the G7 members for this mechanism for guaranteeing guarantees that we want to expand across the continent. There are some guarantees that already exist that would cover primary losses, and some member states based in the region are already part of that. We've got the African Development Bank, who comes off with one vehicle for everybody. It'll be a pan-African vehicle, which means that when capital is guaranteed, that means that our infrastructure investments via the African Development Bank will be guaranteed. And this will attract more private sector investment because those guarantees will be in place. This is something extremely concrete, very tangible, and it's something that we are very excited about. And the second question was the health risk associated with the hantavirus, and I was discussing this with the Prime Minister when the first cases appeared, and obviously we've seen an acceleration of events over the weekend, and the Prime Minister and the government have taken the right decision. The Minister of Health has said at several times the best experts have been consulted, as we always do when it comes to making decisions like this. And France has a very rigorous case tracing protocol, and it takes into consideration all of the scientific data that we have concerning the incubation period and the initial stages of infection. And building on that, the government is setting up very rigorous health protocols, and countries like Spain and other countries who have had experience in this. Remember, this is a known virus, so it's different to what we've just been through a few years ago, but we've learned a lot from COVID-19 and that epidemic, and so the government is taking the right decisions. The situation is currently under control thanks to our the work that's been done, and we thank those who've been so responsive on this. And now at the European level, I'm thinking that an EU-wide protocol might be, and then also the the World Health Organization is going to have to issue its own recommendations, but we're still working on the evolving situation.
Very latest question, which, if I understood properly, was directly addressed to me and was in a certain way more political and personal. If you ask me, in my regard, what is the most important issue for humanity and my main responsibility, I would probably answer you, our children. Our children. And I think Because we can take a lot of decisions. Some of them are sometimes largely too short-term driven. It could be a necessity. And sometimes you have to take, I would say, the second best decision because we all decide under a lot of constraints. But the most important decisions we take in our capacities, and I think it's true for head of state at governments and business leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, is when you try to take into consideration the long run. And I think a lot of decisions we took today are for the long run because they are very demanding and we are transforming a lot of things. But this is not a reason not to take them. And I think the main transformation are the one you decide when you are precisely inspired by the next generation and our children. And I think this is a question of fairness as well. Because the only one not to be present in this room are our children or the children to be born. And this is why they are the one to inspire us. And they are the one that we have to take into consideration in our decisions because they are not yet around the table. And this is why when we speak about education and health, economic opportunities, Africa's opportunities, when we speak about peace, when we speak about as well how to protect children and teenagers against inappropriate content, especially in the digital environment, we are doing the most important things. So my main responsibility is to do my best for our children.
I want to agree with my good brother, President Macron, on the question we were asked, what is the single most important thing? And I would want to say that in the context that he has said, because for this continent, our children will determine the markets of the future. There will be 1 in every 4 people in the world by 2050 will be African. Those are our children. They will determine the markets. They will determine energy consumption. They will be the world's workforce. And they will drive technology. So that is the biggest asset that we have. And that is why it's education, it's health, it's training, and its empowerment is critical for our future. And finally, is to say that because of exactly what President Macron has said, certainly we will have more children than them. And that is why the debate in the past was, are we facing east or are we facing west? I have kept on saying we are facing forward. But yesterday, the young people of this continent told me facing forward is facing south, because that's where the future is.
Thank you.
I request that we now be upstanding. Can we give another warm clap to the chairs of the Africa Forward Summit? We be upstanding to bring this summit to a close. Your Excellencies, we'll have 3 anthems. We'll start with the French national anthem, the AU anthem, and the Kenyan anthem.
Ask the presidents to come here. We do the national anthem.
All right, all the presidents to kindly come for a photo op, and leaders of delegation, presidents and leaders of delegation, kindly to come for a photo op. Peter, if we can have the teleprompter posts removed, please. Just a minute or two for us to remove those posts so that we have a clear picture. So heads of delegation and heads of state. And when it needs to be removed the most, it refuses. But there you go, it's now done. Thank you, Your Excellencies. The anthems.
Thank you very much. President Macron tells me the highlight of this summit is not at the gymnasium, where our artists, our musicians, and important people will bring the curtains down on this Africa Forward Summit at 9 p.m. So for those of you who may have mistakenly is somewhere else. The closing ceremony is somewhere else. So welcome to Kasarani at the gymnasium. There is space for about 6,000 people, so you're most welcome.
Let us allow the Excellencies to